Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the May 10th, 2021 UX group conversation. This is going to be a little different than usual in that I don't have a deck. This is okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the May 10th, 2021. There we go. I knew I was going to forget something. All right. So we're now set up correctly. So we have the UX key review agenda linked in this agenda, and I'm open to any and all questions. And here we go. Anoop, you have our first question. Would you like to vocalize that?
Yes, thank you. So we've had 3 quarters of OKRs to improve SUS, and we haven't been able to do so effectively. I was spending some time on SUS a little bit again, and by definition, it shares sentiments and not direct actionable insights that will actually move the score. And I also found that the verbatims provide insight, but I've seen low scores with really great verbatims and vice versa. So the question is, how do we meaningfully invest in improving SUS?
That is a great question. Adam, you had some feedback, so let me go ahead and let you start.
Yeah, thanks. So focusing on those areas within the product that we know have usability concerns that show up in those themes with SUS is a logical place to start, combining areas of the product that we know people use more than others too. So that way, the thinking is that if we address a certain area that a lot of people use, and we also know that it's suffering in terms of usability, that we can have more impact there than perhaps another area that we don't know a whole lot about in terms of usage or usability concerns. So that's one thing to keep in mind with the current strategy that we're doing. Also, I've learned over my career that changing SUS scores, it takes a lot of time, and a main reason why is that it's really hard for people to pick up on those smaller usability changes that are made in the product over time. Sometimes it takes years, actually, because what sometimes happens is people are just using a fraction of the product, and maybe those changes aren't being made around them. They're impacting other people, but not individuals as much as we think with their specific workflows. So that's my comment on that, Anoop. And it looks like Christy, but you've got a couple things too.
Yeah, thank you for that insight, Adam. I think something else we have to keep an eye on is we know that new users rate our system usability scale score lower than mature users. Because GitLab is so successful, which is wonderful, we are onboarding more and more new users all the time. And so that's where we know we need to focus on improving that part of the experience. And I did link from Catherine, these are not my words. So she in Slack had linked, we found that the significant decrease in the overall score resulted from low ratings on learnability, complexity, and confidence using GitLab. Top themes from user feedback this quarter were missing features and functionality, general usability, documentation/help, system performance, MR experience, and learnability. These are the same themes we've seen quarter over quarter. So we've just got to keep chipping away at these things. Adam, back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, the last couple of weeks, I've been following up with people who have agreed to have people from GitLab follow up with them who conducted the SUS survey. And my goal there was to really understand a little bit more about why they rated the way they did, looking back a year, how things have changed, just a deeper dive into just their score. And it's still early, but I did find something that didn't necessarily come up in the verbatim that super clear. And it was related to what you were saying, Chrissy, where new users, but a slightly different twist. So for example, we have people that have been using GitLab a while. Some of them may or may not scored high on the SUS, but I'm hearing that they're struggling trying to communicate GitLab to new users. So say there's a new employee, they have to stop what they're doing, explain how to do something in GitLab, even though they know how to. Another one is related to learnability also, where say there's an issue and they need to communicate what status is on an issue, and just sending a link to a non-engineer who doesn't use GitLab is way too complex, and just they have to stop what they're doing and just transcribe over an email or Slack message and just explain it that way. So both of those examples are related to learnability, related to new users, but not directly. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, Adam, thank you for the qualitative research you're doing to follow up on the quantitative survey. You know, so surveys are great in that they give you a lot of information about what is happening. Quantitative also always is hard though to get the why. And so Adam has really gone out of his way to dig in with the qualitative research to understand why. And what you're saying, Adam, is interesting because I know you do too, Anoop. I read the verbatims from every single SUS survey. And what you were saying, I've seen before in the verbatims, people saying like, yeah, I know how to use it, but people I work with struggle. Sid.
Yeah, I think this is a really good conversation. And I think I found the SUS presentation that I linked under EI, 1EI, really helpful. So I encourage Anoop and all the product managers to have a look at that. And I want to ask the shadows to add these links to the handbook for the SUS page to the extent that they're public so people can easily find the results.
Yeah, Sid, thank you for bringing it up. Thank you also for linking the deck. And then I also linked a few other resources that folks may find interesting. Adam and Catherine did a QA in video, and it is really, really enlightening. So if you have 15 minutes, it's a really good watch. Okay, Anoop, you have the next question.
Yeah, the second one was along the same lines, which is SUS is much bigger. So is there a more objective method to measure the product usability that we should also consider in the future?
Great question, Anoop. I love your research questions. So yes, SUS is fairly subjective, as you know, mainly because it's self-reported. So I want that part to sink in. There are 10 questions, but people are thinking about their experience and just self-reporting it. There are ways to measure usability that are more objective, meaning just clear fact. And there are some measures. We did recently roll those out this past quarter as one of the KRs. I should have linked to it, I will, I'm sorry. But things like task completion is a big one. So now we're thinking about running a usability study in that context where we can actually observe them completing a task, and if they fail, that's a fact, and if they pass, that's a fact. Same with numbers of errors that they may have encountered, and by errors I mean just wrong paths they may have taken, or things outside of our golden path that we designed. You may have read also, there's another measure, time on task. I don't recommend that one. I did just want to call it out. It can be very problematic, highly error prone. But looking ahead, I do suggest we do some baselining. And what that means is that we just look at what we have in a certain experience or feature. We run a very thorough usability test on it using those metrics that I just called out that are more objective, and we iterate, and then we retest the same way. So I do think that that's the plan for some of the MR work that'll be happening in the next quarter.
Awesome, and thank you. And then would you consider our category maturity assessments once a more objective measure?
Let me think about that. There is a, yeah, I would actually, because it is task completion. So that aspect is there.
Yeah.
We do also ask the single usability question, which is another version of SUS, because I think it is still important to get their understanding of how easy or hard it was to complete the task. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a great question, Anoop. You're right. SUS is a very, very broad measure, and we know that. So we're not pretending like it's not, which is why we also know it cannot be the one thing that we're focused on. There's a lot of other things that we need to do that will get us the tactical information that we need today to help move that number over time. So for anyone who is interested, you can see in 2D, I linked to, we have a KPI for UX research velocity that gives you a sense of how much research is happening. That's not just from the research team, that's also product managers and product designers leading research as well. And a lot of that is solution-based usability testing. I also linked, we've got a KR this quarter for the UXR team to provide a lightweight usability testing framework that is tied to SUS that should hopefully provide a leading indicator, not for the SUS of the entire product, but for little slices of the product. And so that'll be, I think, really helpful as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have the next question as well, and which is, I think, along the lines of, Adam, what you were saying with what we're planning to do for MR. And I was just wondering if you can quickly share about our focus.
Yeah, Marcel Van Remmerden is definitely our in the know person here. So let me turn it over to Marcel.
Sure, thank you. I've already added a bunch of things we're currently doing to the agenda. The first one is the code review team itself has gone ahead and set a KR for themselves to improve the technical performance. They want to make large MRs 40% faster and use 65% less memory when they are open. We also know that technical performance does not always equal perceived performance of the user. So at the same time, Pedro is gonna start looking into how we can measure this perceived performance. And if there's any UX aspects we could do to increase the perceived performance without actually doing any technical performance work in the background. That's in addition to the technical performance work. Third one is we ran an async design critique in the last summer, and some of the issues were still open. We want to not only close them, but also make sure we look at the area that was mentioned most often, which is the merge request widgets. Currently, the information these display is not as transparent and not as easy to understand as we would want it to be. And there's big inconsistencies between these merge request widgets. So users have trouble understanding how they are related to each other and how they are related to the merge status. So we are going to go ahead and clean that up in a more holistic effort. And similar to this, Pedro has already done the same kind of effort for just the widget with the merge button, because there's, I think it was close to 60 different states that widget can be in. And we needed to take a look at how we can make these all work and look well. And the team now had to sadly deprioritize the implementation work because of the performance focus that team currently has. But it's still something we would love to look at in the near future. And then finally, thanks to Soon Jung now being in the code review team for 1.5 milestones, we have been able to look at, for example, consolidating the merge request actions into one place and looking at cleaning up our UI at a more holistic level, and not only looking at small improvements, but looking at how we can really make the MR UI look easier to understand and how it's easier for the user to navigate within an MR. And finally, there were a few remaining issues that were actionable insights from the async design critique that are not related to the MR widgets that were still open. We had 52 in the beginning after the MR design critique, and 29 of these were still open. We have now, thanks to a collaboration with the product team, set a KR to close the remaining ones so that this aspect will also be finished.
That was a great overview, Marcel. The one thing I'll add to this is truly a cross-functional effort. Teams are really excited about participating in this, and quality is also involved. So they also have a KR to increase functional and performance test coverage for large MRs, and that's going to be really important. Pedro.
Yeah, Sid and Anoop, I don't know if you want to comment on anything that Marcel shared.
No, this is excellent. Thank you. Not me.
Yeah. Yeah, I also wanted to share something related to that. So those are all of the initiatives that we have in flight. And we recently merged them, an MR that outlines a process and responsibilities of each group when they're contributing to the merge request experience. And we're right after this group conversation, we have an AMA about this. And so we're doing all of these things, and they're we hope that they help solve a lot of things, but at the same time, we need all of the groups that contribute to the merge request experience to be aligned. And we believe that that is why we're in the current state with a lot of technical and UX debt, is because we haven't had the guidance and clear responsibilities on who should do what. And so, yeah, I encourage you to look at that handbook page, which is related to all of the improvements that we're doing.
Anoop, any other questions on that, or you have the next question?
So this is totally not very objective, but what I've repeatedly seen is when people complain or ask us to address performance, it usually ends up being around large MRs, or it ends up being MR'd the amount of time it takes to run pipelines, especially on .com, but even otherwise. And so that gets conflated with all the other performance issues like how long my page loads or how quickly an interactive response. So performance is pretty vast, but these two seem to be, from what I see, the most the things that people complain about the most. And so I was wondering if those are the most meaningful, highest ROI improvements to focus on, instead of trying to focus on performance across the board on every single page and spending more energy on that part. Because we did that last 2 quarters. We did a lot of LCP improvements. We haven't really seen the complaints go down. That's because these two are the ones that keep coming back up.
So my answer is it's hard to say. I agree with you, Anoop. Those are areas in which we get very specific complaints. We also get feedback that it's just slow, and we don't know, like we can't know what a user or respondent to a survey means by that. That being said, I think we've got to do both, and that is what we're doing. So we've got the OKR, the cross-functional OKR that is focused specifically on MR performance. And in addition to that, Tim Zalman is leading parallel efforts just to improve overall performance. And that's something that we can do more systematically as well. So as we make changes, it kind of helps everything rise. I am not the expert to speak to that. Tim Zalman definitely is. But that's the best answer I can give you on that right now. Does that help? Oh, you're muted.
Well, it gives me a sense of how we need to prioritize if we have to make hard trade-offs. So thank you.
Nope, those were all wonderful questions. Thank you for being so involved in and focused on the usability of our product. I work with you very closely, and I know how much you care about this. So thank you.
And I appreciate all the work. I love when the SUS comes out. It's reading the verbatims is one of the important parts of my time, because it tells me how people feel about the product, not just how they use it. So thank you. And the merge request OKR that merged with the contribution architecture that Pedro, you and Kai have been driving has been amazing. I'm looking forward to that becoming sort of a template for how we do these things through other parts of the product.
Let me pause and see if anybody has any last questions or comments.
I've got a curious one listening to all of this about scoring and UX. Do we slice it by role or persona? Do project managers or product managers have a better experience than developers, and developers than infrastructure administrators? And you know what I'm saying? So do we understand what the experience by role looks like? Because developers might have a totally different usage pattern and view on the product, and maybe much more technical, whereas a product manager might be solely in the UI. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start to answer, but then I'll turn it over to Adam, who'll give you a more in-depth answer. The answer is yes, we do collect that information along with other types of demographic information, and we do slice it in different ways. The struggle with roles is that the vast majority of our respondents are developers. So the responses from other roles are low enough to where statistical significance is not great. That doesn't mean we're not tracking it and looking at it. It just means we're not getting the same quality of data. Adam, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, we are we are tracking it by 4 cohorts, so paid users, free users, new users, and mature, but not necessarily by role, as Chrissy mentioned. That is interesting, though, to see if there's something there, but I wonder, so say if there is, I wonder what we could do at that point. Like, would that really shift focus for us? So it's just something to think about.
Yeah,
Well, I think about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Please, Brad, go ahead.
I was thinking about, the areas of expansion, right? If plan and security drive ultimate, should their experience should be awesome, right? Especially driving higher revenues. Executive visibility and analytics. Just thinking from a sales perspective, I want my happiest people, not to say we don't want developers to be happy, but I want my happiest people driving the most parts of the product that drive the highest amounts of revenue.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what I will tell you is SUS is just one small aspect of the broad research that we do. We talk to a lot of different roles in user research, in particular in our qualitative studies. And you mentioned Secure, so I'll say Secure is doing research all the time. There's an intense focus on usability in Secure because we understand how important it is. So you may not see that reflected in the data in SUS, but it is something we are absolutely giving attention to. Does that help?
Yeah, it sure does. That's kind of what was driving my question is, security or executive visibility, right? If a CIO were to log in GitLab, for a customer that's been around for a long time, how great is their experience to find the information that they want, right? Especially when we're trying to provide outcomes early on in the sales stage, right? Hey, we promise you will do X better if you invest in GitLab, right? And then 6 months later, they go and try to find out how easy is it to get that information. What's their experience like on a regular basis? Those are the kind of things I was interested and concerned about.
Yeah, so the executive insight is an interesting one, and I'll let Anoop add to this because we hear a lot about this in our customer advisory board. My impression based on what we know is that executives are not necessarily going into GitLab to look for analytics by and large. Their teams are coming to them with analytics to prove the ROI of GitLab. And there seems to be a lot of variance in what each company wants to see. So what they seem to want is lots of access to data that they can report on in ways that make sense to them. But Anoop, feel free to confirm or deny.
That is spot on. And what we are doing is starting with the DORA metrics to be able to expose those so that they can have a meaningful, the users of the product can have a meaningful conversation with their executives about how the cycle time is improving, which still is a good place to start. But eventually we want to be able to connect cycle time with real outcomes. So over time, as value stream analytics picks up, imagine being able to create a business, define a business problem and see it activated and see the metrics improve over time. So there's a slightly long-term vision, but eventually that's where we want to get to, so that the entire value stream is completely visible. And that's what's going to bring the executives into GitLab to look at their own dashboards.
Thank you, Anoop, for that extra context. Thank you, Brad, for that question. We are at time. This has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed it as always. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.